The chain-link fence rattled as Marcus finished draining the last of the water from his backyard pool, 20 years of memories disappearing down the drain. He didn't see her watching from across the property line. Karen, phone already dialing 911, her voice sharp with vindication. "I'm reporting an illegal structure demolition in progress." By the time the sirens reached his driveway, Marcus had no idea his simple decision to take down an old pool would trigger a legal nightmare that would expose secrets neither of them wanted revealed. But Corinne had made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten that her own property held evidence of something far worse than a removed pool. Marcus Chen stood in his backyard, surveying the empty concrete shell that had once been the centerpiece of countless family gatherings. The pool was drained now, its walls stained with algae and time, cracks spiderwebbing across the bottom like a fractured memory. His daughter Emma was away at college. His wife Sarah had been gone for 3 years, and the pool had become nothing more than an expensive liability he could no longer afford to maintain. "You sure about this, Marcus?" His friend Dave adjusted his work gloves, standing beside the excavator they'd rented for the weekend. "It's time," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Can't keep living in the past." The demolition permit was taped to his back door, approved 2 weeks ago by the county. Everything was legal, everything was proper. He'd checked and double-checked. The pool was entirely on his property, built in 2003 with all the correct permits. There was no reason for concern. Except for Corinne Whitmore. She lived in the house next door, a colonial-style home with pristine landscaping and an HOA-style attitude despite their neighborhood having no homeowners association. She'd moved in 5 years ago and had immediately appointed herself the unofficial guardian of property values and neighborhood standards. Marcus had learned to avoid her, offering polite waves and keeping conversations brief. As Dave fired up the excavator, Marcus noticed movement in Corinne's yard. She stood near their shared fence line, phone pressed to her ear, her face twisted in that expression he'd come to recognize, righteous indignation mixed with barely concealed glee. "We've got an audience," Dave muttered, following Marcus's gaze. "Just ignore her," Marcus said, but unease prickled at the back of his neck. The excavator's arm swung toward the pool's shallow end, the hydraulic claw positioning itself above the concrete. This was it, the moment of no return. Marcus thought of Emma learning to swim in that pool, her small arms thrashing in water wings while Sarah laughed and encouraged. He thought of summer barbecues, of teenagers cannonballing into the deep end, of quiet evenings floating on his back and watching stars. "Let's do it," he said. The claw descended, metal teeth scraping against concrete. The sound was violent, final. Chunks of the pool's edge crumbled away. That's when the police car turned onto their street. "You expecting company?" Dave killed the excavator's engine. "No," Marcus's stomach dropped. A county sheriff's cruiser pulled into his driveway. Officer Mitchell, Marcus recognized him from neighborhood watch meetings, stepped out, his expression apologetic but professional. "Marcus Chen." Officer Mitchell approached slowly, hand resting casually near his belt. "That's me. What's going on?" "We received a complaint about unauthorized demolition of a structure. Do you have permits for this work?" Heat flushed through Marcus's chest, not guilt but anger. "Yes, absolutely. It's right here." He strode toward his back door, Corinne's presence at the fence line burning in his peripheral vision. Officer Mitchell followed him to the door, examining the permit taped there. He took photos with his phone, comparing them to something on his screen. "This looks legitimate," the officer said. "Can I see the original documentation?" "Of course." Marcus led him inside, pulling the folder from his kitchen counter. Permit application, approval letter, property survey, inspection records from when the pool was originally built. Everything organized, everything documented. Officer Mitchell reviewed each page carefully. Through the kitchen window, Marcus could see Corinne still at her fence, arms crossed, waiting. "Everything appears to be in order," Officer Mitchell said finally. "I apologize for the interruption. We have to respond to complaints, but you're clearly following proper procedure." "Who called this in?" Marcus already knew the answer. The officer hesitated. "I can't disclose that information." "It was Karen Whitmore, wasn't it? My neighbor." Officer Mitchell's silence was confirmation enough. He handed the folder back to Marcus. "You're free to continue your work. Have a good day." Marcus walked the officer out, anger simmering beneath his skin. As the cruiser backed out of his driveway, he turned toward Karen's property. She'd retreated to her porch, but she was still watching, still waiting. "Don't," Dave warned, coming up beside him. "Let it go, man. She called the police on me for following the law." "Yeah, and now they know you're legit. That's your win right there." Marcus wanted to march over there, to demand an explanation, to tell her exactly what he thought of her busybody interference. But Dave was right. Getting into it with Karen would only escalate things. He returned to the backyard and Dave restarted the excavator. For the next 3 hours they worked methodically, breaking up the pool's concrete shell, exposing the rebar skeleton beneath. It was hard, dusty work, and Marcus welcomed the physical exertion. It gave his anger somewhere to go. By late afternoon, they'd made significant progress. The shallow end was demolished, concrete chunks piled in a growing mound near the fence. They'd need to arrange for a dumpster and proper disposal, but that was Monday's problem. "That's enough for today," Dave said, climbing down from the excavator. "My back's killing me." Marcus paid him for the rental and his time, then grabbed 2 beers from the fridge. They sat on his back deck, surveying their destruction. "You think she'll call again?" Dave asked. "Probably. She doesn't strike me as someone who gives up easily." "What's her problem anyway?" Marcus shrugged. "No idea. Maybe she thinks the pool lowered property values. Maybe she just likes being in control." They finished their beers in comfortable silence. After Dave left, Marcus stood alone in his backyard as the sun set, casting long shadows across the broken concrete. The pool that had represented so much life, so much joy, now looked like a wound in the earth, raw and exposed. Inside, his phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "How's the pool demo going?" "Good progress today," he replied. "Should be done by next weekend." "Wish I could help. Love you, Dad." "Love you too." He was about to head inside when he noticed something odd. Near the fence line separating his property from Karen's, the ground looked disturbed. Not fresh. This was older, maybe a few months. The grass was different there, patchy and struggling, not matching the rest of his lawn. Marcus walked over, crouching down to examine the area more closely. The soil was loose, recently turned. He scratched at it with his fingers, frowning. This wasn't his doing. He hadn't done any landscaping here in over a year. His property survey was still on the kitchen counter. He retrieved it, using his phone's flashlight to study the boundary markers in the growing darkness. According to the survey, this disturbed patch of ground was definitely on his property, but just barely, maybe 6 inches from the actual property line. Someone had been digging here recently, and Marcus had a pretty good idea who. He stood up, brushing dirt from his hands, and looked toward Karen's house. Her lights were on, her silhouette visible through her kitchen window. What had she buried on his property? And more importantly, why 12 p.m. Part 2? Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind circling back to that patch of disturbed earth. At 2 a.m. he gave up, pulled on jeans and a hoodie, and grabbed a flashlight from the garage. The neighborhood was silent except for the distant hum of the highway and the occasional bark of a dog. He stood at the fence line, shining his light on the suspicious area. The beam caught something, a faint rectangular depression in the soil, maybe 3 feet by 2 feet, too deliberate to be natural, too recent to be forgotten. Marcus returned to the garage and grabbed a shovel. This was his property. He had every right to know what was buried here. The first shovelful came up easily, loose soil, barely compacted. 6 inches down, the blade struck something solid but yielding. Plastic. He cleared away more dirt, his pulse quickening, and exposed the corner of a large plastic storage container, the kind people used for holiday decorations or seasonal clothes. 15 minutes of digging revealed the entire container. It was heavy, sealed with duct tape around the lid. Marcus hauled it out of the hole and carried it to his garage, closing the door before anyone could see. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, he studied the container. No labels, no markings. The duct tape was silver, industrial strength. He grabbed a utility knife and sliced through the seal. Inside were documents, hundreds of them, organized in folders and binders. Marcus pulled out the first folder, flipping it open. Financial records, bank statements, tax returns, property documents, none of them belonging to Corinne Whitmore. The names on these papers were Richard and Corinne Whitmore, dated from 2019 to 2021. Marcus scanned the contents, his confusion growing into alarm. These weren't just records, they were evidence. Richard Whitmore had been arrested 3 years ago for embezzlement from his accounting firm. Marcus vaguely remembered hearing about it through neighborhood gossip. The man had stolen over $400,000 from clients, funneling it through offshore accounts. He'd been convicted and sent to federal prison. Corinne had claimed total ignorance, portrayed herself as a victim, and kept the house in the divorce settlement. But these documents told a different story. Marcus spread papers across his workbench. Joint account statements showing coordinated withdrawals. Email printouts between Richard and Corinne discussing asset protection strategies. A handwritten ledger in Corinne's handwriting, tracking money movement between accounts. Partnership agreements for shell companies listed in both their names. Corinne hadn't been ignorant, she'd been complicit. More than that, she'd been the mastermind. The deeper Marcus dug into the container, the clearer it became. Corinne had designed the scheme, managed the offshore accounts, and when everything collapsed, she'd fed Richard to the authorities while hiding the evidence of her own involvement. There was more. Financial documents showing Corinne had squirreled away nearly $200,000 of the stolen money in accounts her ex-husband didn't know about. Fake receipts, forged documents, fraudulent tax returns, all in Corinne's handwriting, all bearing her fingerprints metaphorically if not literally. This container was an insurance policy. Either Corinne had buried it to hide it from authorities, or she'd kept it as leverage against Richard. Either way, she'd chosen Marcus's property, probably because if it was ever discovered, he'd be the one in trouble, not her. Marcus's hands shook as he photographed every document with his phone. Dawn was breaking outside, pink light filtering through the garage windows. He'd been up all night, but adrenaline kept him sharp. His phone rang. Emma's name lit the screen. "Hey, sweetie, you're up early. Dad, you need to check the neighborhood Facebook page, like right now." Marcus's stomach dropped. What happened? "Just look, I'll wait." He pulled up the page on his laptop. The most recent post, made 20 minutes ago by Corinne Whitmore, had already accumulated 47 comments. Concerned NEIGHBORS. Does anyone know the regulations regarding unpermitted demolition work? My neighbor is destroying a pool without proper oversight, and I'm worried about property damage, environmental hazards, and safety violations. The county has already been called once, but work continues. What are our options for protecting our property values? The comments were a mix of support for Corinne and questions about the situation. Several people tagged the county building department. Someone mentioned calling code enforcement. A few neighbors defended Marcus, pointing out he'd always been responsible, but they were outnumbered. "Dad," Emma's voice brought him back. "Are you okay?" "I have permits, Em. Everything's legal. She's just—" He stopped himself. His daughter didn't need to hear him rant about vindictive neighbors. "She's always been awful," Emma said. "Remember when she tried to get Mrs. Patterson fined for her garden gnomes?" "I remember. What are you going to do?" Marcus looked at the storage container full of evidence. What was he going to do? "I'm going to handle it," he said. "Don't worry about me. Focus on your midterms." After they hung up, Marcus made coffee and sat at his kitchen table thinking. He could take the evidence to the police. Corinne had committed multiple felonies: fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. She'd serve serious prison time. But if he went to the police, he'd have to explain how he found the evidence. Digging on his own property was legal, but a good defense attorney might argue he'd been trespassing or that he'd somehow contaminated the evidence. And Corinne would know he'd found her insurance policy. She'd lawyer up immediately, possibly destroy other evidence, maybe even accuse him of planting the documents. No, this required a different approach. Marcus spent the morning reinforcing his documentation. He printed copies of his demolition permit, the property survey, every email exchange with the county. He compiled everything into a binder, added photos of the work in progress, and made 3 copies. At noon, he walked next door and knocked on Corinne's door. She answered wearing yoga pants and an expensive-looking sweater, her expression shifting from surprise to hostility in a heartbeat. "Marcus, what do you want?" "We need to talk. Can I come in?" "I don't think that's appropriate." "It's about the container you buried on my property." Corinne's face went white, then red, her jaw clenched. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Sure you do. The plastic storage container, about 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, full of financial documents. Ring any bells?" She tried to close the door. Marcus caught it with his hand. "You trespassed on my property," he said, his voice low and steady. "You dug a hole 6 inches over the boundary line and buried evidence of federal crimes. I found it last night, photographed everything, and now we're going to have a conversation about what happens next." Corinne's eyes darted past him, checking if anyone was watching. The street was empty. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice wavered. "Richard took the fall for embezzling $400,000, but according to your own records, you designed the scheme. You managed the offshore accounts, and you hid nearly $200,000 that he didn't even know about. The forensic accountants missed it because you're smarter than he was, but you kept records, insurance maybe, leverage, doesn't matter. What matters is I have them now." Corinne's hand tightened on the doorframe. "What do you want?" "Right now, I want you to invite me inside so we can discuss this like civilized adults, unless you'd prefer I take this to the FBI field office downtown. Your call." She stepped back. He entered. Corinne's house was immaculate, expensive furniture, designer touches, fresh flowers on every surface. All purchased with stolen money, Marcus realized. The house itself had been bought with Richard's embezzled funds, then kept by Corinne in the divorce under the guise of being an innocent spouse. They sat in her living room, tension thick enough to cut. "How did you even know it was there?" Corinne asked finally. "I didn't. I noticed disturbed ground near the fence line while working on my pool demolition. Got curious. It's my property. I had every right to dig." "You can't prove I put it there." "Your fingerprints are probably all over those documents. Your handwriting is on half of them. And I'm guessing if the FBI examines your yard, they'll find your shovel with soil that matches my property. But here's the thing, Corinne. I don't want to destroy your life." She looked up sharply. "What?" "I want the harassment to stop. The police calls, the Facebook posts, the interference with my legal renovation project. You leave me alone, I leave you alone. Simple as that." Corinne's eyes narrowed. "That's it. You're not going to blackmail me." "I'm not interested in your money or your crimes. I just want to finish demolishing my pool and move on with my life. But if you keep causing problems, If you make one more complaint, post one more thing online, or interfere with my property in any way, I take everything I found to the FBI. Understood. She sat silent for a long moment, her mind clearly racing through options, calculating angles. How do I know you won't turn me in anyway? You don't, but I'm a retired engineer who minds his own business. I have no interest in your drama. However, I'm also not someone who tolerates bullying. The choice is yours. Leave me alone and this stays between us, or keep pushing and face federal prosecution. What's it going to be? Corinne's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, Marcus saw her not as a threat but as what she really was. A desperate woman who'd built her entire life on stolen money and lies, terrified of losing it all. Fine, she whispered, I'll leave you alone. That includes deleting your Facebook post. Fine. And if anyone asks, you'll tell them you were mistaken about my permits. She nodded. Marcus stood. I'm going back to work on my pool now. Have a good day, Corinne. He was at her door when she spoke again. What are you going to do with the container? He turned back. Keep it somewhere safe. Insurance policy for both of us now. He walked home, his heart hammering but his head clear. The Facebook post was deleted within minutes. By afternoon, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You win. But if you ever change your mind about those documents, remember, I know people who make problems disappear. Marcus stared at the message, then blocked the number. Corinne was trying to regain some sense of control, some feeling of power. Let her have it. He had the evidence and she knew it. The real power was his now. 36, 13 p.m. Part 3. The following week passed in tense silence. Marcus continued demolishing the pool with Dave's help, the excavator grinding through concrete and rebar, while Corinne's house remained conspicuously quiet. No police visits, no complaints, no social media posts. The neighborhood Facebook page showed Corinne had even commented positively on someone else's renovation project, as if trying to rebuild her image as a reasonable neighbor. Marcus kept the storage container locked in his garage, the documents photographed and backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts. Every night, he checked the locks twice before bed. On Wednesday afternoon, Marcus was hosing down the excavator when a silver BMW pulled into his driveway. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. He was mid-50s, gray hair perfectly styled, with the kind of polished appearance that screamed lawyer or executive. Marcus Chen, the man extended his hand. My name is Douglas Pemberton. I'm an attorney representing Corinne Whitmore. Marcus didn't take the hand. She was supposed to leave me alone. This isn't about your pool, Mr. Chen. May we speak privately? Against his better judgment, Marcus led him to the back deck. Pemberton sat without being invited, opening his briefcase with practiced efficiency. My client informs me you've come into possession of certain documents that don't belong to you. The documents I found buried on my property, you mean? Documents that were placed there without your knowledge, yes. My client would like them returned. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Those documents are evidence of multiple felonies. Your client buried them on my land without permission, which is trespassing at minimum. I'd say possession is 9/10 of the law here. Pemberton's smile was thin. Mr. Chen, let's be realistic. If you take those documents to authorities, you'll find yourself entangled in a very complex legal situation. Questions will arise about how you knew where to dig, whether you've tampered with evidence, whether you're attempting extortion. My client has resources for a lengthy legal battle. Do you? Is that a threat? It's a reality check. However, my client is willing to make this worth your while. Pemberton slid a document across the table. This is an offer to purchase your property for 20% above market value. Cash sale, close in 30 days. You take your money, relocate, and everyone moves on with their lives. Marcus looked at the number. It was substantial, enough to buy something nicer in a better neighborhood, enough to pad Emma's college fund significantly, enough to make this entire situation disappear. And the documents returned to my client as part of the sale agreement, so she can destroy evidence of her crimes, so everyone can move forward without unnecessary complications. Marcus stood. Tell your client the answer is no. This is my home. I'm not selling it, and I'm not returning documents she illegally buried on my property. If she wants to escalate this legally, I'll be happy to explain to a judge exactly what those documents contain. Pemberton collected his papers slowly, his expression hardening. You're making a mistake, Mr. Chen. That's for me to decide. After the lawyer left, Marcus immediately called his own attorney, Jim Bradford, who'd handled Sarah's estate and was one of the few lawyers Marcus actually trusted. He explained the situation in detail, leaving nothing out. Jesus, Marcus, Jim said when he finished, you've stumbled into a hornet's nest. What are my legal obligations here? Technically, if you have evidence of federal crimes, you should report it, but you're not legally required to do so immediately. The documents were abandoned on your property, which gives you some standing. However, if Corinne claims you're extorting her, things get complicated. The fact that you confronted her before going to authorities doesn't look great, and if her lawyer is already involved, they're building a defense strategy. What should I do? Document everything. Every interaction, every threat, every communication. Don't speak to her or her representatives without recording it. Virginia is a one-party consent state, so that's legal. And Marcus, consider whether this is a hill you want to die on. That night, Marcus couldn't shake Jim's words. Was this worth it? He'd wanted a quiet life, to demolish his pool and move forward. Instead, he was locked in a battle with a wealthy neighbor who had the resources to make his life hell. His phone rang at 11 p.m., unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Reeves with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. The voice was crisp, professional, female. I understand you may have information relevant to an ongoing investigation. Marcus's blood went cold. How did you get this number? We received an anonymous tip that you're in possession of evidence related to the Whitmore embezzlement case. I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you. An anonymous tip from who? That information is confidential. Are you willing to meet? This was Corinne's move. She'd turned him in first, probably claiming he'd stolen the documents or was trying to extort her. She was getting ahead of the story, controlling the narrative. I'd like my attorney present, Marcus said. Of course, how's tomorrow at 2 p.m., FBI field office downtown? Marcus agreed and immediately called Jim, despite the late hour. His lawyer answered on the third ring, groggy but alert when Marcus explained the situation. She's trying to flip the script, Jim said. Make you look like the criminal. We'll meet with them, but you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth. It's your best defense. The next afternoon, Marcus sat in a windowless conference room at the FBI field office. Jim beside him, Detective Reeves across the table with her partner, a granite-faced man named Agent Torres. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Chen, Reeves said, opening a folder. We'd like to ask you about your relationship with Corinne Whitmore. Marcus explained everything, finding the disturbed ground, digging up the container, discovering the documents, confronting Corinne. He showed them his property survey, photos of the burial site, his text exchanges with Emma about the pool demolition. He handed over copies of select documents from the container, keeping the originals in a safe deposit box per Jim's advice. Reeves studied the documents, her expression unreadable. Torres took notes. Mrs. Whitmore claims you broke into her property and stole these documents, Reeves said finally. She says you're attempting to extort her. That's a lie, Marcus said calmly. The burial site is on my property. I have a survey that proves it. And I never asked her for money. Her lawyer offered to buy my house, not the other way around. Do you have proof of that? Marcus pulled out his phone, playing the recording he'd made of Pemberton's visit. Virginia's one-party consent law meant he didn't need to tell the lawyer he was being recorded. Tor's eyebrows rose as Pemberton's voice filled the room, offering to buy Marcus's property for 20% above market value in exchange for the documents. That's interesting, Reeves said. Mrs. Whitmore didn't mention that. Jim leaned forward. My client found evidence of a crime on his property and is cooperating fully with your investigation. If Mrs. Whitmore is claiming otherwise, perhaps you should examine her motives more closely. The agents exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Mr. Chen, Reeves said, we're going to need the original documents, all of them. I'd like immunity first, Jim said. My client has done nothing wrong. But I want it in writing before we hand over evidence. We can arrange that. It took 3 days to negotiate the immunity agreement. During that time, Marcus continued working on the pool, the excavator chewing through the last of the concrete. Neighbors had stopped by, some offering help, others asking questions about Corinne's deleted Facebook post. Marcus kept his answers vague, pleasant, non-committal. On Saturday morning, he delivered the original container and all its contents to the FBI field office. Reeves and Tors examined everything with forensic precision, documenting each item. This is substantial, Reeves admitted. If this is authentic, and preliminary examination suggests it is, Mrs. Whitmore was far more involved in the embezzlement scheme than we originally believed. What happens now? Marcus asked. We investigate, build a case. If the evidence supports it, we'll seek an indictment. How long will that take? Months, possibly longer. These things move slowly. In the meantime, I'd advise you to avoid Mrs. Whitmore entirely. No contact, no confrontations. That evening, Marcus stood in his backyard, looking at the empty space where the pool had been. All that remained was a large hole in the ground, waiting to be filled. Dave had scheduled the delivery of filled dirt for Monday. By next weekend, his lawn would be restored, the pool nothing but a memory. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've done. You should have taken the money. Marcus deleted the message and blocked the number. Then he called Jim. She's threatening me again. Save the message before you delete it. We'll add it to the file. Jim, when does this end? When the FBI finishes their investigation. Until then, keep your head down and don't engage. But Marcus knew it wouldn't be that simple. Corinne wasn't the type to go quietly. She'd been backed into a corner, and cornered animals were dangerous. On Sunday morning, Marcus woke to find his mailbox knocked over, the post snapped at the base. Fresh tire tracks cut across his lawn. Nothing was stolen, nothing overtly criminal, but the message was clear. Corinne was fighting back. He called the non-emergency police line and filed a report. Officer Mitchell came out, took photos, promised to increase patrols in the area. Has Mrs. Whitmore been bothering you? Mitchell asked carefully. We've had our differences. I heard about the FBI investigation. Word travels in law enforcement. Between you and me, Mr. Chen, watch your back. When people think they're about to lose everything, they get unpredictable. That night, Marcus installed security cameras around his property. 6 cameras, covering every angle, all connected to cloud storage. If Corinne or anyone else came onto his property again, he'd have proof. The cameras caught their first incident Tuesday night. At 2:17 a.m., a figure dressed in dark clothing approached Marcus's garage. They tried the door locked. They circled the house, testing windows. The cameras captured everything in crisp high definition, infrared night vision rendering the intruder in ghostly white and black. The figure was slim, female, moving with purpose. When she turned toward one of the cameras, her face was partially visible despite the hoodie. Karen. She was looking for the container, Marcus realized. She didn't know he'd already given everything to the FBI. She thought he still had leverage over her, and she was trying to steal it back. Marcus watched from his bedroom window, phone in hand, ready to call 911. But Karen didn't break anything, didn't actually enter his property beyond walking around it. She gave up after 10 minutes and disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, Marcus sent the footage to Detective Reeves. Her response came within an hour. "Thank you. This is very helpful. We'll be executing a search warrant this week." On Friday, 3 FBI vehicles arrived on their street. Neighbors emerged from houses, watching as agents entered Karen's home with boxes and equipment. The search lasted 7 hours. Marcus watched from his window, feeling no satisfaction, no triumph, only a hollow sense that things had spiraled far beyond his simple desire to remove an old pool. When the agents finally left, Karen stood in her doorway, her face a mask of rage. She looked directly at Marcus's house, and even from a distance, he could feel the hatred radiating from her. His phone rang. "Detective Reeves." "Mr. Chen, I wanted to give you a heads up. We've arrested Karen Whitmore on multiple federal charges: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. She's being held pending bail hearing." That was fast. "The evidence you provided was compelling. Combined with what we found in her home, additional documents, hard drives with deleted files we managed to recover, we have a strong case." "What about Richard Whitmore?" "We're reviewing his case. If he was genuinely unaware of the extent of his ex-wife's involvement, we may reconsider his sentence. But that's above my pay grade." After they hung up, Marcus walked outside. The fill dirt had been delivered, the hole that was once his pool nearly filled. Another week of work, some sod, and it would be like the pool never existed. Except it had, and removing it had revealed secrets that would destroy his neighbor's life. Marcus thought he'd feel vindicated. Instead, he just felt PM Part 4. Karen made bail within 48 hours. Marcus learned this not from the FBI, but from the sound of her garage door opening at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning. He lay awake in bed, listening to her moving around next door, wondering what came next. The answer arrived Monday afternoon in the form of a process server, handing him a lawsuit. Karen Whitmore v. Marcus Chen. Civil suit for $500,000, alleging trespassing, theft of private property, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. The complaint was 53 pages long, professionally crafted, and almost certainly designed to bankrupt him in legal fees even if she lost. Jim Bradford read through it in Marcus's living room, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is a SLAPP suit," Jim said finally. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to punish you for reporting her crimes by burying you in litigation costs." "Can she do that?" "She can file it. Whether it survives a motion to dismiss is another question. But Marcus, defending this will cost you easily 6 figures if it goes to trial." "I don't have 6 figures." "I know, that's the point." Marcus stared at the documents, feeling the weight of them. He'd done the right thing, found evidence of crimes, reported them to authorities, and now he was being punished for it. "What are my options?" "We file a motion to dismiss based on your immunity agreement. We argue that reporting suspected criminal activity to federal authorities is protected speech. We demonstrate that everything in her complaint is retaliatory, and we hope the judge agrees." "And if the judge doesn't?" Jim was quiet for a moment. "Then we fight, But I won't lie to you, it'll be expensive and ugly. That week, Marcus learned what it meant to be targeted by someone with resources and nothing left to lose. Corinne's lawyers filed motion after motion, each requiring responses, each generating billable hours. They deposed Marcus for 8 hours, asking the same questions in different ways, trying to trap him in inconsistencies that didn't exist. They subpoenaed his phone records, his bank statements, his emails. They demanded to see every communication he'd had with Emma about the pool demolition, looking for evidence of premeditation, as if he'd somehow known Corinne had buried evidence on his property. The legal bills mounted. Jim was doing his best to keep costs down, but there were limits. Marcus had to dip into Emma's college fund just to cover the first month's expenses. Emma called one evening, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Dad, I saw the GoFundMe." Marcus's stomach dropped. "What GoFundMe?" "Someone in the neighborhood started one. Help Marcus Chen fight back against legal abuse. It's already raised $12,000. Marcus pulled up the page on his laptop. The campaign had been started by Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman 3 houses down who'd been targeted by Corinne years ago over her garden gnomes. The description outlined Marcus's situation, included screenshots of Corinne's deleted Facebook post, and called for community support against a wealthy bully using the legal system to harass a good man. The comments section was filled with support from neighbors, many sharing their own stories of Corinne's behavior. Someone had posted copies of complaints she'd filed against various neighbors over the years, 23 different complaints in 5 years. From lawn too long, to Christmas lights up past January 1st, to excessive bird feeders attracting pests. A pattern emerged in those complaints. Corinne targeted people she perceived as weak or unable to fight back. Elderly residents, single parents, people who just moved in and didn't know the neighborhood dynamics. "Dad, are you there?" Emma's voice brought him back. "I'm here." "You can't use that money. It's charity." "Emma, I know what you're going to say, but Dad, these people believe in you. They're trying to help. Please don't let pride stop you from accepting it." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. When did you get so wise? "I had a good teacher." After they hung up, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, looking at the GoFundMe page. $12,000. From neighbors he barely knew, people he'd only waved to in passing. Mrs. Patterson had contributed $500. The Johnsons from down the street had given $200. Even teenagers from the neighborhood had chipped in $20 or $30. His phone buzzed. A text from Dave, saw the GoFundMe. "Count me in for $1,000. Nobody messes with my friends." The motion to dismiss hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Jim spent every available hour preparing, building a case that Marcus's actions were protected under whistleblower statutes and that Corinne's lawsuit was transparently retaliatory. Meanwhile, Marcus's life became a nightmare of legal minutiae. He couldn't post on social media without worrying it would be used against him. He couldn't talk to neighbors without wondering if they'd be deposed. Even Emma's supportive texts had to be carefully worded in case they were subpoenaed. The filled dirt sat in his backyard, the pool hole only partially filled. He didn't have time or energy to finish the project that had started everything. 2 days before the hearing, Detective Reeves called with an update. "Mr. Chen, I thought you should know. We've discovered additional victims of the Whitmore scheme. Corinne and Richard defrauded at least 15 more people than we originally thought. We're talking over $800,000 in total losses." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the victims are organizing. They're filing a class action lawsuit against Corinne for the money she hid, and several of them want to file amicus briefs supporting your motion to dismiss." Amicus briefs. Friend of the court briefs. Essentially, They'll argue to the judge that Karen has a pattern of using legal intimidation to silence people who expose her crimes. It could help your case. How did they even know about my case? Your neighborhood GoFundMe went viral locally. One of the victims saw it, recognized Karen's name, and contacted the others. The criminal justice system works slowly, Mr. Chen, but sometimes justice finds its own paths. The night before the hearing, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept rehearsing potential questions, worrying about things beyond his control. At 2 a.m., he gave up and went to sit on his back deck. The hole where his pool had been looked like a grave in the moonlight, dark, empty, waiting. He'd removed one source of memories only to create something worse. Marcus. He jumped, turning to find Mrs. Patterson standing at the edge of his property. She wore a bathrobe and slippers, her white hair loose around her shoulders. Mrs. Patterson, what are you doing up? Saw your light on, figured you couldn't sleep either. She climbed the deck steps slowly, settling into the chair beside him. Mind if I sit? Please. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Mrs. Patterson had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, long before Karen, before Marcus, before most of the current residents. You know, she said finally, I almost moved after Karen started harassing me about those gnomes. Felt stupid being driven from my home over garden decorations, but I stayed. Know why? Why? Because bullies count on good people backing down. They count on us being reasonable, being conflict-averse, being too tired to fight. And every time we give in, we tell them their tactics work. This isn't about garden gnomes, Mrs. Patterson. This is federal crimes, lawsuits, serious money. No, dear. This is about the same thing it's always been about. Someone who thinks rules don't apply to her trying to destroy anyone who says otherwise. The scale is different, but the principle is the same. Marcus looked at her weathered face, saw the steel beneath the grandmother exterior. How did you deal with it, the harassment? I documented everything, filed counter complaints, made myself too expensive to bother with. Eventually, she moved on to easier targets. Mrs. Patterson reached over and patted his hand. But you're doing something I couldn't. You're actually stopping her. Those fraud victims, the families she destroyed, you're giving them justice. Don't forget that when you're drowning in legal bills. After she left, Marcus felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't even just about Karen. It was about what kind of neighborhood, what kind of community, what kind of world they wanted to live in. The hearing took place in circuit court, Judge Angela Morrison presiding. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table with Douglas Pemberton and two other attorneys, all in expensive suits, projecting wealth and power. Marcus sat with Jim, who'd worn his best suit but still looked outgunned. The gallery was full. Mrs. Patterson sat in the first row. Dave was there, along with at least 20 other neighbors. 3 of Karen's fraud victims had flown in from other states, their presence a silent statement of solidarity. Pemberton argued first, painting Marcus as a vindictive neighbor who'd trespassed, stolen private property, and then maliciously reported his client to federal authorities to justify his theft. Your Honor, Mr. Chen had no evidence these documents were on his property until he illegally excavated them. He then used them to threaten my client before opportunistically handing them to the FBI when his extortion attempt failed. This lawsuit seeks to hold him accountable for these violations of Mrs. Whitmore's rights. Jim's counterargument was surgical. Your Honor, every claim Mr. Pemberton just made is demonstrably false. Mr. Chen found disturbed soil on his property he owns, where he had every legal right to dig. He discovered evidence of federal crimes buried there without his knowledge or consent. He reported those crimes to authorities after Mrs. Whitmore's own attorney attempted to bribe him into silence. These are not the actions of an extortionist. These are the actions of a law-abiding citizen doing his civic duty. Jim presented the property survey, the photos of the burial site, the recording of Pemberton's buyout offer. He presented the FBI's immunity agreement, Detective Reeves's testimony confirming Marcus's cooperation, and the timeline showing Karen had called police on Marcus before he'd even found the documents. This lawsuit is textbook retaliation, Your Honor. Mrs. Whitmore is using the courts to punish a whistleblower. Virginia's anti-SLAPP statute exists precisely to prevent this kind of abuse. Then the amicus briefs were entered. 3 separate filings from Karen's fraud victims, each detailing how Karen had intimidated, threatened, or legally harassed them when they tried to recover their stolen money. Judge Morrison read through the documents, her expression unreadable. Karen sat rigid at her table, staring straight ahead. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said finally, "do you have anything to add?" Karen stood, her composure perfect despite everything. "Your Honor, I am the victim here. I've been arrested, publicly humiliated, and now I'm being prevented from seeking legitimate legal recourse against someone who violated my privacy. I ask the court to allow my case to proceed." Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair, studying both parties. "I'm going to rule from the bench," she said. "Mr. Chen, you found what you reasonably believe to be evidence of serious crimes on your property. You reported those crimes to federal authorities. You cooperated with their investigation. These actions are protected speech under both the First Amendment and Virginia's whistleblower statutes." She turned to Karen. "Mrs. Whitmore, this lawsuit is transparently retaliatory. Every claim could have been raised with law enforcement if you believed Mr. Chen had committed crimes. Instead, you filed a civil suit seeking damages. Your own attorney's recorded offer to buy Mr. Chen's property undermines your credibility completely." Pemberton stood. "Your Honor, I'm not finished, counsel. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney's fees to Mr. Chen under Virginia's anti-SLAPP statute. Mrs. Whitmore, you and your attorneys will be jointly liable for all of Mr. Chen's legal costs incurred in defending this action." The gallery erupted in applause. The judge's gavel came down. "Order, this is still a courtroom." Marcus felt Jim's hand on his shoulder, heard the lawyer's quiet "we won," but it all seemed distant, unreal. He looked across the courtroom at Karen. She sat frozen, her facade finally cracking. Tears streamed down her face, not tears of remorse but of rage. Her eyes met his, and Marcus saw something that chilled him. This wasn't a PMP. The attorney's fees award came to $127,000. Combined with the GoFundMe contributions and the judge's sanctions, Marcus was made whole financially. But money couldn't restore the 3 months of his life consumed by legal warfare, couldn't erase the stress that had aged him years, couldn't undo the transformation of his quiet street into a battleground. Karen's criminal trial was set for 6 months out. She remained free on bail, living in the house next door, a constant reminder that sometimes justice moved at glacial speeds. Marcus finished filling his pool hole and laid fresh sod. Within weeks, you couldn't tell there had ever been a pool there, just smooth, green lawn stretching toward the fence line that separated his property from hers. Emma came home for summer break, and Marcus tried to reclaim some normalcy. They grilled in the backyard, watched movies, avoided discussing Karen despite her presence looming next door like a storm cloud that refused to break. "Dad, you seem different," Emma said one evening as they sat on the deck, quieter. "It's been a long few months." "You did the right thing, you know that, right?" Marcus looked at his daughter, 20 years old, brilliant, compassionate, so much like her mother. "Sometimes doing the right thing costs more than you expect to pay. That's what makes it right. If it was easy, everyone would do it." 2 weeks later, Marcus woke to find his car keyed. Someone had dragged something sharp along the entire driver's side, deep gouges cutting through paint to bare metal. His security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned that night. The power cord to his garage system cut clean through. Officer Mitchell came out, filed a report, but there was no proof. Karen's car hadn't moved from her driveway. No witnesses, no evidence. "I can't prove it was her," Mitchell said quietly, standing beside the damaged car. "But between you and me, get better cameras, hide them, because this won't be the last incident." Marcus installed new cameras that afternoon, professional-grade equipment with battery backup and cellular connectivity. He positioned them carefully, some visible as deterrents, others hidden in places Karen wouldn't think to look. The next incident came a week later. Marcus's trash cans were knocked over at 4 a.m., garbage strewn across his driveway. The hidden cameras caught a teenager on a bicycle, $50 changing hands at the edge of Karen's property before the kid rode off. Marcus sent the footage to Officer Mitchell, who picked up the kid that afternoon. Under questioning, the teenager, 16 years old from 3 neighborhoods over, admitted Karen had paid him via Venmo to vandalize Marcus's property. He showed the transaction on his phone, lawn care services for $50. Karen was arrested that evening for solicitation of vandalism and witness intimidation. She made bail again within hours, but the conditions changed. No contact order with Marcus, electronic monitoring, surrender of passport. The walls were closing in. Marcus should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt watched. Karen's house had become a fortress, curtains always drawn, no movement visible except her occasional trips to meet with lawyers. But he could feel her there, plotting, seething, waiting. Emma noticed his paranoia. "Dad, maybe you should stay with me at my apartment for a while. Get away from here." "This is my home. I'm not letting her drive me out." "Pride isn't worth your safety." "It's not pride, it's principle." But Emma was right to worry. The footage from Marcus's hidden cameras told a disturbing story. Karen stood at her windows for hours, watching his house. She walked the fence line at night, testing boards, looking for weaknesses. She took photos of his property with a telephoto lens, documenting something, evidence for another lawsuit maybe, or something worse. Jim Bradford called with news about the criminal case. Karen's legal team approached the prosecutor about a plea deal. She'd plead guilty to reduced charges, serve 18 months minimum security, pay restitution to victims. 18 months. She stole $800,000 and tried to frame her ex-husband. The federal system is backlogged. The prosecutor wants a guaranteed conviction without tying up resources on a trial. It's not ideal, but it's something. What about Richard Whitmore? His conviction is being reviewed. If Karen's plea includes testimony about her role as the primary architect of the fraud, he'll likely get his sentence reduced, maybe even time served. Marcus thought about the man he'd never met, sitting in federal prison for crimes his wife had masterminded. Will he be okay? Financially, no, he lost everything, but at least he'll be free. That night Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood at his bedroom window looking out at Karen's dark house. A light flickered in her upstairs window, her bedroom, directly across from his. For a moment, 2 silhouettes faced each other across the property line, separated by darkness and 30 feet of suburban grass. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. "You destroyed my life. I'll never forgive you." Marcus blocked the number, but the message lingered in his mind. He'd exposed her crimes, cooperated with authorities, defended himself legally. But in Karen's mind, he was the villain of this story. The next morning, Marcus woke to sirens. He rushed to his window and saw fire trucks and ambulance police cars all at Karen's house. Smoke poured from her garage, thick and black against the dawn sky. He threw on clothes and ran outside. Neighbors gathered on the street, watching firefighters battle the blaze. Officer Mitchell stood at the perimeter, keeping people back. "What happened?" Marcus asked. "Fire started in the garage, spread to the main house. We're still assessing." "Is Karen okay?" Mitchell's expression was grim. Ambulance took her 20 minutes ago. Smoke inhalation. The fire was contained within an hour, but Corinne's garage was destroyed and her house was heavily damaged. Fire investigators spent the afternoon combing through wreckage, taking samples, photographing everything. Detective Reeves showed up around noon. She found Marcus on his deck, where he'd been watching the investigation unfold. "Mr. Chen, interesting morning. Is Corinne all right?" "She'll live. Second-degree burns on her hands and arms, smoke inhalation. She's at county medical under observation." Reeves sat down without being invited. "Fire marshal says the blaze started with an accelerant. Gasoline, probably. Multiple points of origin." Marcus's stomach dropped. "You think she—" "I think Mrs. Whitmore was burning documents. Financial records, probably. Things we hadn't seized in our initial search warrant. The fire got away from her." Reeves pulled out her phone, showing Marcus photos. "We found a fire pit in her garage, metal drum, half-burned papers. She was systematically destroying evidence." "That's obstruction." "Among other charges, yes. The plea deal is off the table now. She's looking at trial and the prosecutor is pushing for maximum sentences on all counts." After Reeves left, Marcus sat alone, processing everything. Corinne had been so desperate to hide her crimes that she'd literally set her own house on fire. The woman who'd called the police on him for legally demolishing a pool had become an arsonist, destroying evidence and nearly killing herself in the process. Emma called that evening. "Dad, I saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It was Corinne's house, not mine." "Still, this whole situation is insane." "It's almost over, Em, one way or another." But it wasn't over. Corinne's hospital room became a makeshift courtroom, where federal prosecutors brought additional charges: destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice, arson. She pleaded not guilty to everything, her lawyer arguing diminished capacity due to stress and harassment. The narrative Corinne's defense team spun was masterful in its audacity. Marcus Chen, the vengeful neighbor who targeted an innocent woman, planting evidence and orchestrating her destruction. They filed motions to exclude the documents Marcus had found, claiming they were tainted. They demanded investigations into Marcus's background, his finances, his relationship with the FBI. Judge Morrison shut it down with prejudice, but the damage was done. Local media picked up the story. "Neighbor war escalates to arson," read one headline. "Suburban feud ends in federal charges," read another. Comment sections filled with armchair experts, half supporting Marcus, half convinced he'd somehow orchestrated everything. Marcus stopped reading the news. He installed blackout curtains and spent his days working in the house, avoiding the spectacle his life had become. Then Richard Whitmore reached out. The email arrived 3 weeks after the fire. "Mr. Chen, my name is Richard Whitmore. I'm currently serving time for crimes I didn't fully commit. Thanks to your actions, the truth is coming out. I've been granted early release pending review of my case. I wanted to thank you personally for your courage. You've given me back my life." Marcus stared at the email for a long time. Here was a man who'd lost everything: his career, his freedom, his reputation, because his wife had manipulated him into a scheme he'd only partially understood. And now, because Marcus had found a buried storage container, Richard was getting a second chance. He replied simply, "I'm glad something good came from this situation. I wish you the best." Richard's response came within minutes. "If you're willing, I'd like to meet. I have information about Corinne that might help you understand what you're dealing with." They met at a coffee shop in a different neighborhood, neutral ground where neither of them was likely to be recognized. Richard looked older than his photos. Prison had aged him, carved lines in his face that told stories Marcus didn't want to hear. "Thank you for meeting me," Richard said, stirring his coffee with trembling hands. "I know this is awkward. You said you had information." Richard pulled out a folder, thin, worn, containing maybe a dozen pages. "These are letters Karen wrote to me while I was inside. She thought she was being supportive, playing the loyal ex-wife. But reading between the lines," he slid the folder across, "she's not stable, Mr. Chen. She never was." Marcus opened the folder. The letters started normal updates about the house, neighborhood gossip, promises to wait for him. But they deteriorated quickly. By the sixth letter, Karen was rambling about conspiracies, about neighbors plotting against her, about the FBI setting her up. "She has a persecution complex," Richard said quietly. "Always has. She genuinely believes the world is against her, that people are jealous of her success. When things go wrong, it's never her fault. It's sabotage, betrayal, conspiracy." "You're saying she believes her own lies?" "I'm saying she doesn't see them as lies. In her mind, she's the victim of every situation. She embezzled money because clients were underpaying her. She buried evidence on your property because the FBI was persecuting her. She burned her house because you forced her to desperate measures. There's no reasoning with her, Mr. Chen. No amount of evidence will make her accept responsibility." Marcus closed the folder, feeling cold despite the warm coffee shop. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she's dangerous, and because you need to understand she won't stop. Even if she goes to prison, even if she loses everything, she'll blame you. And when she gets out—" Richard didn't finish the sentence. "What should I do?" "Protect yourself. Document everything. And don't expect her to suddenly see reason or accept defeat. People like Karen don't work that way." After Richard left, Marcus sat in the coffee shop for another hour, processing their conversation. He'd thought this was a simple story. Bad person does bad things, gets caught, faces consequences. But Richard was right. Karen genuinely believed she was the victim, that Marcus had orchestrated her downfall through malice rather than uncovered her crimes through accident. That made her unpredictable, and unpredictable people were dangerous. The trial began in September. Marcus attended every day, sitting in the gallery with the fraud victims who'd become unlikely allies. He watched Karen's defense team argue their case with impressive conviction, painting her as a woman pushed to breaking point by an aggressive neighbor and overzealous prosecutors. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documents Marcus found, the hard drives recovered from Karen's house, the testimony from financial experts and fraud investigators, it all painted a picture of systematic, calculated theft spanning years. Richard Whitmore testified for the prosecution, his voice steady despite visible emotion. He described how Karen had designed the scheme, how she'd convinced him it was legal asset protection, how she'd fed him to investigators when everything collapsed while hiding her own involvement. The fraud victims testified about life savings lost, retirements destroyed, college funds evaporated. One woman broke down on the stand, describing how she'd considered suicide after losing everything. Karen showed no emotion throughout. She sat at the defense table, perfectly composed, occasionally whispering to her lawyers but never reacting to testimony. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and arson. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Judge Morrison showed no mercy. "Mrs. Whitmore, you orchestrated a sophisticated fraud that destroyed lives. When caught, you attempted to frame your ex-husband. When exposed, you harassed and intimidated the person who discovered your crimes. When prosecuted, you destroyed evidence and committed arson. You have shown no remorse, no accountability, and no recognition of the harm you've caused." The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison, with restitution to all victims totaling $847,000, plus all legal fees incurred by Mr. Chen in defending your frivolous lawsuit. Karen stood to speak, her first public words in months. "This is a travesty. I am the victim here. Marcus Chen destroyed my life out of petty jealousy. The FBI persecuted me. This court has denied me justice, but I will appeal and the truth will. Mrs. Whitmore, Judge Morrison interrupted, you've been given multiple opportunities to take responsibility. You've chosen to double down on lies. This court stands adjourned. Marshals led Corinne away. She didn't look at Marcus as she passed, didn't acknowledge the gallery of victims watching her final moments of freedom. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Marcus declined interviews, heading straight to his car, but Mrs. Patterson caught him at the parking garage. "Marcus, wait." He turned. She was smiling, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for all of us, for standing up when it was hard. I just wanted to remove my pool, Mrs. Patterson. And that's what makes you a hero, dear. You didn't set out to save anyone. You just refused to be bullied. Sometimes that's all it takes." That evening, Marcus sat on his back deck, looking at the space where his pool used to be. The grass had grown in beautifully, uniform and green. You couldn't tell there had ever been a hole there, ever been concrete and water and memories of happier times. His phone rang. "Emma." "Dad, I saw the news. It's really over." "It's really over. How do you feel?" Marcus thought about that question. How did he feel? Relieved, certainly. Vindicated, perhaps, but also exhausted, aged by the ordeal, forever changed by the experience of having a neighbor's crimes upend his quiet life. "I feel like I can finally breathe," he said. "Come visit me next weekend. Let's do something normal. Movie, dinner, no drama." "I'd like that." After they hung up, Marcus opened his laptop and logged into the neighborhood Facebook page he'd avoided for months. Mrs. Patterson had posted a long message thanking him publicly, detailing everything Corinne had done over the years, celebrating that justice had finally been served. The comments were overwhelming, messages of support, gratitude, shared stories of Corinne's harassment. But one comment stood out, posted just minutes ago from an account Marcus didn't recognize. "Marcus Chen is a thief and a liar. This isn't over. I'll be back." The account had no profile picture, no friends, no history. But Marcus knew who'd written it, even from a federal holding cell awaiting transfer to prison. He deleted the comment, blocked the account, and closed his laptop. Richard had been right. Corinne would never accept responsibility, never acknowledge defeat. But that was her burden to carry now, not his. Marcus stood, stretched, and walked into his house. Tomorrow he'd call a realtor, not because Corinne had driven him away, but because it was time. Time to move forward, time to find a place without bad memories lurking next door, time to start fresh. The pool was gone, the lawsuit was over, the criminal was convicted. And Marcus Chen, who'd only wanted a quiet life, had learned that sometimes standing your ground meant everything changed anyway. But at least he'd stood. At least he'd refused to back down. At least he'd proven that bullies, no matter how wealthy, how connected, how willing to destroy everything around them, could still face consequences. 3 months later, Marcus's house sold for asking price. He moved to a quiet neighborhood 40 minutes away, a smaller house with no pool, no complicated history, no vengeful neighbors watching from across a fence line. Emma helped him unpack, laughing as they discovered he'd somehow accumulated 3 coffee makers and no kitchen towels. "New beginning, Dad," she said, hugging him in the empty living room. "New beginning," he agreed. His phone buzzed, email notification, subject line, Richard Whitmore. Marcus opened it, curious. "Mr. Chen just wanted to let you know I've been fully exonerated and released, starting a new job next month as a forensic accountant, helping companies detect fraud, using my experience for good. Corinne is serving her sentence at Alderson Federal Prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. I hope by then she's found some peace. Thank you again for everything. You gave me back my life. Richard." Marcus replied with congratulations, then deleted the email. That chapter was closed now. Time to write new ones. He stood at his new living room window, looking out at a street where nobody knew his story, where he was just another resident, where pools and buried evidence and federal trials were simply things that had happened somewhere else, to someone else, in a life that felt increasingly distant. Emma turned on music, some pop song Marcus didn't recognize. She danced through the empty rooms, unpacking boxes, her joy infectious. "Hey, Dad," she called from the kitchen. "There's a community pool 3 blocks away. Membership is only $50 a year." Marcus laughed, really laughed, the first genuine laugh in months. "Perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect." Outside, the sun set on his new neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere, Corinne Whitmore sat in a prison cell, still convinced she was the victim, still planning her appeal, still certain that justice had failed her. But here, in this moment, in this new home with his daughter's laughter echoing through empty rooms, Marcus Chen felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. And that, he realized, was the truest justice of all, not Corinne's punishment, but his own freedom to move forward, unburdened by her chaos, finally able to build the quiet life he'd always wanted. The pool was gone, and Marcus was free.